Okay. How do you start the beginning of the first episode of a brand new podcast? Well, I suppose you start by introducing who the hell you are. My name is Dan Bennett. I have 20 years of experience, hence the grey in the beard. Well, that might have something to do with my children. I have 20 years of experience in the innovation and branding and advertising world. I spent a long time working for some of the world's biggest agencies and the world's biggest brands. And then the other side of the equation is I'm also a gamer. So campaign mode is a interesting fusion-like potato chip of business and gaming, if that metaphor makes any sense, which it probably doesn't. So in official terms, campaign mode is set up to deconstruct the business of gaming. And that's what this podcast is going to be all about. And what you can expect to see and hear from us is going to be interesting interviews, conversations with gaming and business insiders, folks that have spent time building and growing game platforms, building and growing brands, and then gamers themselves that live at the intersection of those two things. So episode 1 is a good one. We're joined by Earl Patton, who is the CMO of Unanimous Games, Unanimous Games being Rock Nation's gaming arm. Earl himself has a fascinating background in sports marketing, and he's also worked for some of the biggest brands and biggest NBA teams in the world. He spends a little bit of time talking about that and how it's relevant now to his role as Chief Marketing Officer at Unanimous Games. I'm going to hand over pretty quickly to the interview. We spoke earlier on today via Zoom. Forgive us some of the technical limitations as it relates to Zoom, but the content's really good. So if you stick through it, I think you'll enjoy it. If you have any questions for Earl or Unanimous, we can certainly link out to where you can find more information on Earl and Unanimous within the show notes or in the YouTube information section. So enjoy Earl Patton, Chief Marketing Officer of Unanimous Games. Go. All right, so today I'm thrilled to have with me Earl Patton on the podcast. Earl has an extremely interesting background, which I'm going to ask him to dive into a little bit later in this conversation. But he's here today in his form as CMO of Unanimous Games. And I'm going to ask Earl to go into a bit of detail about Unanimous as we go. But he's also, as if that wasn't something that kept him busy enough, he's also a sports marketing adjunct professor. I'm going to have him talk a little bit about that as well. Based in New York City, Unanimous Games is a full-service esports company bridging the gap between the esports industry and the entertainment world. So I think it's a pretty interesting business model. And the mission that Unanimous have is to amplify the voices or give an amplified voice to an underrepresented community of gaming enthusiasts. So I've known Earl a little while. I remember my first conversation with Earl, and I was just blown away by what Unanimous are doing and what Earl's bringing to life there. So I'm going to have this fellow on this side of the screen here because, of course, we're isolating right now, which means I can't do it face-to-face. Earl, I'm going to ask you to give us the 5-minute Earl or the 2-minute Earl, or let's get a quick intro into who you are, sir.
Okay. All right. So I guess to take it back a little bit, born and raised in Brooklyn, New York, Bedford-Stuyvesant area, but pretty much lived around the world. As you mentioned before, I'm an adjunct professor in sports marketing, but a lot of that stemmed from my background in the sports industry. So I think to take it, let's say, from university onwards. So actually at Drexel, which I went for undergrad, I was just a business major and like anyone else kind of looking for careers in terms of like what to do for a living. And I stumbled into internships at UPS, which was for industrial engineering. And that actually became my full-time job after graduation. Now, the job didn't suit me with respect to, I guess, my career ambitions. But the one thing about it, it did teach me the fundamentals with respect to relationships of efficiencies, time study, and the relationship between time and money. Because as an industrial engineer at UPS, there is a lot that goes into delivering a package from one destination to another. Amazon actually made it a multi-billion-dollar industry, but UPS and probably FedEx are probably at the forefront of that. So but the hub operation, which is pretty much the backbone of UPS, operates at night. And when you are a young college student, the last thing you want to do is spend your evenings working. So I transitioned into sports and entertainment. So first, the entertainment industry, as a lot of my colleagues and my friends that I grew up with were in the music business. So growing up in Bed-Stuy, I grew up in childhood with members of the Wu-Tang Clan. Biggie lived around the corner from me, literally, and so that whole, I guess, culture pretty much presented a lot of opportunities with respect to business. So started at a couple of internships, but then I went to Capitol Records and did product management and a lot of marketing. But I wanted to be in the sports business. I always had a passion for sports, and particularly the NBA. So I guess for you kids out there, this is when there was no internet. So I literally had to write a letter and send a resume to every NBA, NFL, Major League Baseball, NASCAR, soccer team in the country and the world. And as I did that, I got some feelers and some feedback. First job was with the Portland Trailblazers, which I actually did business development for them. So essentially managing the relationship between the corporate sponsors and the basketball team. But I wanted to get in what was called basketball operations. So what I did was I started networking within the team, and Jim Paxson, who was the assistant general manager, he and I cultivated a friendship. He became general manager of the Cleveland Cavaliers, and then I went over there and did what's called basketball operations, so and player development, player relations. So managing salary cap, scouting, so forth and so on, and did that for a few years. We drafted LeBron, so that was that turned the franchise around for good fortune. Yeah, it's pretty good. So after that, the team was sold, so I was going to transition to something else. And I didn't want to necessarily do basketball because I didn't want to necessarily be just a quote-unquote basketball executive. I wanted to be, I guess, a little bit more well-rounded. So I had a couple opportunities to do something else within sports. So my choices were either IMG, a couple of sports management agencies, but I chose actually Sony and did sports marketing with Sony domestically in the U.S. for one of their technology divisions. And that turned into me actually being on the FIFA World Cup team within Sony. So they took out a sponsorship with the World Cup for 2010 in South Africa and 2014 in Brazil. So I joined that team, moved to Tokyo. We pretty much did all the business development and strategy. And then I moved to South Africa to manage the relationships between FIFA and our sponsorship. So coincidentally, Gray South Africa now was actually the agency of Reckitt, a company by the name of Volcano. So Paul Jackson was my go-to person on that. And then came back to the States and started doing some adjunct work. Started with St. John's University, just teaching kind of like the business of sports. At the time, esports was, starting to get on the radar, but nothing to like it is now. And then coincidentally, the NBA opened up an office in Johannesburg to manage their content, TV relations, and grow the game from amateur and development level. So a couple of relationships that I had with the NBA came to fruition, and I moved right back to South Africa and helped open up that office. We did an NBA Africa game where we actually had NBA players come for a development and a benefit game. And after I did that, I decided that I kind of wanted to spew it on, kind of go out on my own. So a friend of mine who works for Rock Nation, who's an agent there, introduced me to one of my current business partners where we developed some businesses in Africa, most notably a company called Fanbase Analytics. So what we discovered in a conversation over coffee is that we both have a lot of experience in the analytics space with respect to sports. And outside of the U.S., there's not necessarily, I put it like this, we own the fan in terms of knowing, fan tendencies and so forth and so on, and the value of a fan. Not to say that other countries don't, but not to the level of probably the United States. I think there's a reason why, NBA franchises and most of the professional franchises within professional sports are at billion-dollar valuations, because the one thing we're good at is that we know how to monetize sports and monetize business. So I always, get into this argument with my friends from, the UK, who say, well, you guys don't know anything about soccer, the biggest, sport in the world. It's like, well, we own pretty much all your teams in the Premier League, at least.
You own my team as well.
Yeah, so we know something about business. That never goes off well. But the point being is that we developed a business where we would help teams pretty much identify where that fan value is. So those things and kind of like investments in the, let's say, sports tech world were taking shape. And then I came across, I was introduced to Bryant Biggs, who founded Unanimous Games. And we just had about almost a year and a half to 2 year ideation on what the gaming space can look like. And Brian is noted for being one of the co-founders, or co-founder for Rockefeller Records at the time, which is now Rock Nation, through a couple of iterations. And Brian and I had a conversation around gaming, but also business and development in Africa. So what we did was we developed Unanimous Games around pretty much the pillars of how Rock Nation was developed, and had various verticals within the space to pretty much grow it. So everything from management to content creation, but also, to your point in the intro, to develop gaming for, I guess, would you say, underrepresented communities. And that's, people of color and also women. So that's the short version.
And a fascinating version. And that's why I wanted to have you on, because there's a podcast in each of those iterations on that journey. There's no doubt about it.
Sure.
But let me get into the Unanimous Games piece a little bit with you. So you touched on it, but within the broader gaming industry, what are the pillars or the niches for Unanimous? So what are the specific sort of, what is the structure of the business, I suppose?
Yeah, so the first thing, if you look at, again, how traditional agencies are developed, and let's say sports agencies, they would have a player management side. So with the growth of players being recognized as athletes, but also the influencer market, a lot of the gaming industry is driven, by influencers. So managing their careers, helping them structure their careers, and helping them realize their value. A lot of times, these are young people who went from a subculture, just streaming on their own, to being in a basement. But now you have, Madison Avenue taking a closer look at their value. So, helping them kind of like, navigate that shift in their life, which pretty much came overnight, is actually, it keeps climbing and increasing. So that's the first thing, management. Content creation is important, because the one thing is, content is king, but also you're having a audience that needs to content that speaks to them. So you'll have, influencers of different kinds. So for instance, we manage two influencers, Cheese and Wet and iPod Ken Carter, who are pretty much probably serve a different audience than Ninja, and everything else in between. So for us, that player aspect or management aspect and content creation was key in building this. The other thing we do develop is actually develop our own mobile games. So we actually have ownership of a couple of development studios. And what we do is we develop games for clients. We develop games notably for artists. We have a relationship with Rock Nation where a lot of their artists within their roster want a specific game developed for them, as well as corporate partners. So we develop games and other type of mobile app solutions. And there's new technology and new business. So like anything else, we actually represent clients. So from brands to municipalities that want to do things, whether it be for an amateur level for kids for outreach, or brands that want to just kind of like shift some of their marketing dollars and start capturing the gaming market. We consult with them and assist them in creating campaigns and creating things of value to move those messages forward.
One of the things we chatted about last time we spoke was the partnership and relationship you guys have with BET, and there was some experiences you developed in partnership with them. Can you tell us go into a bit of detail on that for me?
Sure. So that is actually one of our other pillars, which is event management. So before the pandemic, and particularly with the growth of music festivals, there was becoming more of an add-on of what type of other elements can you add on to a festival experience, to engage crowds. And as gaming was growing, we were starting to do these gaming experiences that were a little turnkey within a music festival environment. So for us, our partnership with Viacom and BET allowed us to do engage with them with their BET LA Live. So we actually developed a gaming lounge for them, and it came up very, very well. And we actually have a couple of those experiences planned out globally throughout the world. Obviously, things are on hold now, but one of the things, again, to the point of our pillars, is event management and managing those gaming experiences, because that's something that also brands can actually latch on to in terms of capturing a diverse audience, as well as introducing kind of like new products or services to the marketplace.
So the reason that interests me is that, and if we talk, link this in a little bit to your sports management pedigree, there are certain ways I'm seeing brands looking at gaming, and the easiest on-ramp for a lot of brands into gaming seems to be those things that have a similar look and feel to some of the things they've engaged with in the past, right? Like, the thing about esports, we see quite a few brands going in, but they're going in kind of in a fairly big sort of sponsorship way, right? Well, I know we can slap a logo on that. I understand how to do that. It's not too nuanced yet. And then you've got the event side of things, which enable them, especially if you guys are doing the heavy lifting of bringing the smart tech, the new games, the influencers, providing the connection to BET properties in this case. Again, that's another way brands can see how they can get involved, right? It's a fairly easy, gentle on-ramp into that space. One of the things I wrote about yesterday on a blog post I put up was about how I think right now, particularly as gaming is so central to how we're all living, because we're all, everyone's locked down, brands need to be super careful that they're not just rushing in without any authenticity, right? Suddenly they turn up in the game, with no real invite or not in a subtle way. So I don't know if you have a point of view on that, but it feels like now's the chance for brands to start building that relationship, start to have a presence in these channels. But I know some of them are going to rush in and they're going to be shunned, and it's wasted dollars, right?
Yeah. I mean, look, you have, like any industry, you're going to have endemic brands in which, they're part of the industry. They understand the supply chain with the industry. They understand, how to position themselves. But with anything, when you have eyeballs and growth, whether it be an ad agency or any type of marketing executive and any type of intelligence is going to start to look at, okay, that's something that we need to pay attention to. Now, mind you, when that happens without, let's say, proper research or proper guidance, you're going to tend to have certain companies that are just going to make mistakes. So they're going to, figure, well, let me get the most notable influencer, or let me, try to capture the market by paying into it. And the one thing is that, for this generation or this audience, they can't be, they can't be purchased, or they can't be bought. If an event, it doesn't feel authentic to them, or doesn't, align kind of like with their value, because they're very protective of the game, and because the game is part of who they are, brands will fail. So for us, what we look to do is, to your point, we bring them in slowly, we bring them in carefully, and we bring them with a strategic focus on the long run. I mean, if you're just looking just to promote for an event, get in and get out, then, that's not going to be sustainable. but because the one thing is that gamers, they're very loyal to brands. I actually look at it analogous to NASCAR. NASCAR has one of probably the most loyal brand affiliations between the sport and the fans than any other sport. I mean, for the most part, if those cars are funded by fans, and because they have to go, if there's a Tide car, there is definitely a correlation between people buying Tide and people rooting for the Tide car driver. So esports actually has the opportunity to actually do that. So the thing is, whether you be the P&Gs of the world, what have you, and I'm sure they have, smart enough people to understand this, is that unless you're going to get into it in an authentic way, then, you're pretty much going to be wasting your time.
What's the other side of that coin like? So being as you represent gamers, we'll call them in this case, but obviously they're influencers as well. How do you see those guys and girls maturing? What is their, I think about them to some extent as semi-pro. Certainly some of them are very much pro. How are they becoming businessmen and women as this gaming world evolves? And how do you guys help them with that? I know that's very sort of close to your heart as somebody that mentors a lot of these guys and girls.
Yeah, the thing is what they're getting an introduction into the world of business, but particularly into the world of the marketing business, and how marketing is basically shaping audience. So the one thing is that is to teach them what do followers mean and what do metrics mean, and what do those convergence rates mean, and how do those actually convert into value with respect to your own individual brand and dollars. Just because you have X amount of million of, let's say, followers doesn't mean you can sell a product. So for them, it's really understanding what those metrics mean with respect to your personal brand. So a lot of that is kind of like the first iteration of teaching, but also for them to really understand the value of culture capital, particularly within the Black and Brown community. And there's a lot of, I guess, relationships between gaming and hip hop. And obviously we know hip hop is, a multi-billion-dollar industry, but, you look at, I think it was last week, whereas I want to say Travis Scott went into Fortnite and it was 12.3 million downloads. I mean, that's of immense value. And I'm sure he understands that value. And I'm sure Fortnite understands that value. But gamers and influencers alike, when they see that, they pretty much need to understand what's the business behind the game, so to speak. Even in sports, when I work in sports, I've always, thought the more mature players were only players who can play the sport well, but understood, let's say, in the sense of the NBA, the collective bargaining agreement, how the revenues work. Why is it that players get paid, X amount of money? How is what's called basketball-related income, which is all the sponsorship income that goes in pretty much in a pot and is split up, and it's a real sophisticated mechanism as to how revenues are shared. So when as a participant, when you understand the business behind the business in which you're participating, you become actually a little bit more value to yourself. Same thing as, in the entertainment space. I mean, you have artists, that sell millions and millions of records, but unfortunately, may not make a lot of money, where you may have an artist that sells not as many records, but could make a fortune because they understand, publishing and intellectual property and so forth and so on.
How do young up and coming gamers get on your radar at Unanimous? Is it a matter of them rising in profile through the sort of esports leagues? Is it a matter of them being influencers first and gamers second, so you're seeing and hearing about them? A little bit to your last point, how do you keep track of these guys coming up?
It comes in various ways. I mean, some of it is it's similar to, like I said, an agency, particularly sports. You'll go out and, let's say, recruit, those that you feel fit the culture of Unanimous Games, and then some of it is obviously word of mouth. I mean, some of them have come to us because they understood the space in which we occupy, and we've been providing something as I guess an additive service that they never had or had never had access to. So the thing is, for us, if we're serving a need, sometimes that's pretty much half of it is just showing up. So we've been fortunate in that sense.
I have two more quick ones for you. One is about, let me see, what's the best order? Let's start with this one. One is about the current state of play, right? The world's a little bit upside down right now. We know that. And it's certainly coming out of this. We all know this is going to be the mother of invention in some regard. And certainly we're seeing that with gaming. You mentioned Travis Scott's 12.3 million. His reach to 12.3 million members of that Fortnite community is staggering. But how are you seeing how are you seeing games? How do you see them coming out of this? I mean, we're certainly seeing a tipping point in terms of breadth of use. There's no question. But what do you think is what's next on the horizon when we think about limited people going to stadiums, the lack of ability to commune around sports? Does esports suddenly become bigger than it's ever been for that reason? That can be streamed. Where's your head on that?
So I think the one thing is that it's going to benefit because of the state of the world, so to speak, with respect to number one, exposure, and secondly, recognizing that there is a definitive skill set within gaming, and then it's actually going to bring in a little bit more casual fans. So you're already going to have your hardcore gamers and so forth that are fans of the community, involved in the community, and so forth, and that takes you at a certain let's say market cap in terms of, let's say, a revenue number.
Right.
But when you start teetering on the casual fans, and that's pretty much where brands are looking to, because it's like, okay, I know you have a core audience, but can you capture the everyday person eyeballs within what you're looking to do? And I think that's going to pretty much be one of the drivers or primary differences that come out of this pandemic.
So the last one then is, and you touched on it there, and it is, I guess it's about, you and I are both in the service of brands, in the service of marketers. What advice do you have in relation to how some of these brands can be a little bit more progressive with how they approach, folks like Unanimous Gamers more broadly moving forward? What is the opportunity here for those most progressive brands?
Okay. Well, I think the first and foremost is that they have to get knowledgeable about the industry and what those benefits are. So, obviously, when you hear something is popular, just don't jump in because of popularity. There's a lot of good and responsible reporting from services such as Newzoo. Goldman Sachs has actually done a few reports on the gaming space. So, when Goldman Sachs is bothered to do a report on it from their insights community, then it's a real industry. But also, start committing some definitive. It can be exploratory dollars towards it, and seeing what those benefits are, but also know what you want out of it. I think what happens a lot, and what could be challenging for some brands, is that they don't really identify what they want out of this space. They know they want to be involved. They probably know they have to be involved, but they don't necessarily know exactly what those KPIs are for them, or those deliverables with respect to, is it sales? Is it brand awareness? Is it, corporate social responsibility? Is it, education? And I think that would be the biggest upside for brands at first. And then secondly, have a long-term, strategic approach with respect to, staying in the space. So I always say that, a lot of people come into something because it's, the song of the day or whatever the case may be. But, digging a little bit to the album and really get to know that artist. So if you look at it from that standpoint, it's like, look at it in terms of a long-term part of your strategic focus, because what's going to happen is that you don't want to look back, a year from now or 2 years from now and say, wait a minute, where are we within this space, and you don't have any traction in it, or not even any type of presence, because you didn't pay attention to it. And it's still, as big as it is, it's still in its infancy stage. I mean, it hasn't gotten to where it needs to be. In relation to, I guess, to your previous question, is that one of the things that is actually helping is that, obviously, let's say ESPN, for instance, there is no sports on, so there's been a lot of esports gaming tournaments that's going on. But if you look at, and I go to the example of NASCAR, their racing game, if you take a quick glance at it, it doesn't look any different than the actual Daytona.
Yeah.
And the simulating structures that the gamers are actually participating in is no different than a car. So there's actually been situations where Lewis Hamilton has alluded to that part of the reason for his success is that he, growing up on video games, the steering wheel is more analogous to a joystick than it is to an actual steering wheel. So as a younger driver, it probably gives him a clear-cut advantage, because he's developed a certain level of hand-eye coordination, in addition to, obviously, his God-given ability, to go X amount of miles per hour. But the fact that it is pretty much a joystick as well for that steering wheel is definitely something that it probably caters to him.
So his brother actually is, you probably know this, his brother is one of the world's leading virtual Formula One racers. Funny you say that. Interesting.
Yeah.
This has been great. Listen, I know I've probably monopolized a bit more of your time than I promised, but we got going, and that's as much your fault as it is mine. So I appreciate you getting into the weeds on some of this stuff. It's brilliant. I'll make sure we link out to Unanimous's site and a few other places, so if people want to follow up on some of the things you've mentioned,
absolutely,
certainly they can. We'll have you back on this, because
absolutely,
there's a million other things we can talk about. So I want to thank Earl Patton, who's the CMO of Unanimous Games, for joining us today, and stay safe, my friend.
You do the same, bro. All right, see you soon.
All right, mate. Earl Patton, everybody. I want to thank Earl for taking the time. Very busy guy, so for him to take half an hour to sit and speak with us is very much appreciated. I thoroughly enjoyed talking to him, and we'll definitely have him back at some point in the future on the podcast, hopefully in person, once we're allowed back out of our basements, houses, apartments, or wherever we may be. So in the next few weeks on the Campaign Mode podcast, we have some further truly brilliant minds coming on, from insiders in the gaming space to brand and business builders. And we're going to continue that cadence and the general theme that you saw today with Earl in relation to unpicking the opportunities for brands in gaming and then gamers within the brands and business world. So that's the theme, that's the gist. I would recommend, if you want to hear or learn more about that you subscribe and continue to hit those notifications so you know when we have a new one up. We're going to be aiming to do this every week. And I think they're going to be worth a listen. Always appreciate feedback, so if there's anything we can do differently or anything you'd like to know in relation to the people we're talking to, by all means, hit us up and let us know. In the meantime, thanks for joining us. Thanks for making it through our inaugural episode. It's been fun. Episode 1. And we'll see you next week. Stay safe, my friends, and we'll see you soon.